Okay, good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for joining. So during this talk, I will give a small overview of LabNation as a startup, how we started. So LabNation itself has started through a Kickstarter design, which you may have heard as a very nice way to start up a company. You get a lot of money, and that you can go ahead and do your ID. But the question if it's really that easy, basically, to start a company out of that. So during this short talk, I'll first have a small introduction about where the idea come from our product, and then go to the Kickstarter campaign itself. So as you can see, the product itself is an oscilloscope, where we had the idea that, okay, oscilloscope is typically a bulky device, which can be made in a much newer way, newer interface, and so we basically redesigned the whole interface of an oscilloscope to make optimal use of today's technologies, like, for example, a tablet or touch interface on a laptop. If you go to the next slide, as you can see, actually, where did the ideas come from? Over the years, I assembled a whole bunch of USB devices, and typically they managed to try to fit on all of the different buttons on one screen, or they try to mimic traditional scope interfaces onto a screen like you see on the bottom right. But that is obviously not the best and optimal way to make usage of a touchscreen. So the idea was that we would, of course, focus on very decent oscilloscope hardware, and also to completely rethink the interface of an oscilloscope and make it a very clean and intuitive interface. And as you can see on the left side, I think you'll agree we achieved in our objective of making a much cleaner and easy approach for an oscilloscope. So, regarding this idea, how did this turn into a Kickstarter? So this slide is a bit about the preparation for it. As you can see on the left side, working out the electronic prototype itself was only part of the story. A big chunk of work also went in the software, getting it working on different platforms, because we didn't want to target only one platform. We want to cover iOS, Android, Windows, Linux, OS X, everything basically. So it's in one time, at this moment, when basically we got everything working on all the platforms, that we basically had the idea, okay, this is something special, something unique. It might be worth in turning this into a Kickstarter. As you can see, it was about June 2013, where we basically had fundamentally working prototype ready. And all the rest, so it took about 6-7 months additional, is really in preparation of the Kickstarter itself. It's iterating the PCB to get it into in maturity, sampling all different accessories, because you can't just show up with an empty box. A promotional movie for the Kickstarter itself. Starting up a company, has to be a US company at that time. At this time you can also have European companies. And then in February 2014, we were completely ready and prepared to start a Kickstarter campaign itself. Most Kickstarter campaigns they take about a month, and as you can see, they went quite smooth. They started smoothly, and basically it continued to just work out just fine. And in the end, there was a small sprint from people that were attracted to the device in the very end. It's a bit not typical curve for Kickstarter. Typically, you start off with a sharper curve because you try to make as much PR and publicity around your Kickstarter campaign as possible. We didn't really do this, which was maybe a mistake, but okay, things went out pretty nice in the end anyway. So during 1 month, we managed to sell, pre-sale, basically about 1,500 units, and we achieved quite a nice figure of about $300,000 that we got from these people. One thing about Kickstarter, if you're thinking about it, is also about upgrade possibilities, which is nice, but of course it's also the very definition of feature creep. So you promise things that you originally didn't really have in mind, and so it means you're over-promising yourself. And this also for us, because you're so addicted to the Kickstarter rush itself, promised new designs. Also we got a lot of feedback, and we promised to put a memory chip in the scope itself, which caused that we had to do a complete redesign, which in the end, of course, also made for a much better product, but it also meant a lot of unintended additional work in the end. So, since there's a lot of people talking about startups in the coming days, I will only focus on the Kickstarter campaign itself and on the period after the Kickstarter campaign. and to be very honest about it, to show you actually what happened to the money that we received from the initial funding people. So we started off with a nice number, about $300,000. Convert to euros at that time is about 290. But first thing that you should think about is that already a lot of money is just gone to Kickstarter fee itself. It's about Kickstarter, Amazon fee. It was 12, 13%. So that's already a big chunk. And then you start off in good faith. Okay, you have all these people that are really trusting you, so you need to deliver. But of course, it sounds like a lot of money, but you need to produce as well. And that is the whole story about the rest of this talk. So you can start off, and of course you need to buy the very basic equipment. You don't buy fancy stuff because you need to keep a tight budget. IT stuff, you need to have a build server, only the basics, but to make sure you get started. Some software licenses to get hardware designing tools and so on. Some basic furniture, you can see at points was very basic, but that is no problem at that time. You just want to make this happen and make this product to get it into production. More accessories. Okay, you promise during Kickstarter, but you need to be sure that you really find things that you're 100% sure about. Typically from Asia, including shipment costs, so also ramping up to a couple of €1,000. Then, as we promised, we want to make a completely different layout. So we made a whole description about this and had this made to designers, because if you just leave UI design up to some engineers, okay, you end up with typical interfaces of USB scopes. So this is really 3 total different designs that we got from the designers. And then we sent it out to the people who backed us, and the majority voted for the top one, so that's basically the one we selected. Can be very expensive. This was also through an open platform, 99design.com. It's amazing if you want to have some designs and get them done nice and in a cheap way. New iterations, prototypes, PCBs, components, and so on. Certification, something that is skipped by a lot of companies, but actually have to do it. It's a lot of stress, a lot of money. Luckily, we had to do it only once because it was my first time right. Test it up for production. You need to have also the test and measurement equipment at the production site, so that when your devices are produced, that they can be tested and calibrated automatically. And this is the point basically when you are getting ready towards production. And as I mentioned before, that is the very point where you need to take into account that this moment is coming, and you still need to have sufficient funds to get to production. For example, the first 20 samples, they were manually calibrated, manually tested, so they cost quite a lot. You see the first set of 100 pieces. It's the next set. Also, you need to ramp up production slowly. You can't just go to a first production batch of 1,000 pieces, because every order of magnitude that you ramp up, there will be new problems arising. If you have 10 pieces, there will be problems. And you need to sort them out completely. And that is actually something we didn't do here. There was a problem with the first set of 20 pieces that we thought it really had to do about soldering and the temperature, and okay, we said, okay, we didn't follow some things, and now we do it correctly, and we will not have this problem anymore. And because with the Kickstarter campaign, everything is public, and you are under time pressured by 1,500 people, we said, let's go for it. And that's why it says the first set of 100 pieces, because the same problem was there, and we had to scrap the first full batch of 100 pieces. Accessories, okay, you need to order enough sufficient cables and other accessories for full production. The boxes, also designed and produced. It's also takes some time and money, of course. And then the next set of 100 pieces. This, of course, typically, hopefully, you don't have to do, but okay, in our case, this happened. And then is basically the moment where you need to decide to step on the gas and go for production. But there's, of course, something else. Up to this point, we simply had the purchasing costs, but of course, there's also something like wages. Part of our team did it for free, but some members, of course, they needed a wage. And as you can see from how much it was over the period of time, about a year, it was really very basic. But okay, it of course also needs to be taken into account. And then, when you want to step into production, this is the most critical point, I think, in any Kickstarter project, and that's why I call it the Kickstarter Valley of Death, because it's at this moment you only have this amount of money left, and you need to produce everything that you promised. And if you're lucky, you can produce this amount of units, about 1,500. But imagine what happens then. You send them out, so you have no more money and no more stock. So it basically means that the past 12 months you've worked quite hard for nothing in the end. So what you typically want to do is produce more. So you have additional stock, which allows you to sell off and, of course, gives you new capital to start up the next production batch. And this is typically where a lot of Kickstarter campaigns are finding trouble and need to get in external investments. Luckily, there was also something from the very beginning. Immediately after Kickstarter campaign, we had an online web shop, and from the very first day, basically, there was a steady income of online sales. So that's also quite important that you get your web shop up as soon as possible, so that it allows to get at least a basic, not much at that time, of course, but still a basic income. And because we knew this, of course, it's the graph here, but of course, in the very beginning, you can already do the calculations, and you know what your budget will be. And so this allowed us to, at that point, go all in basically, and produce not only sufficient devices to send out to the backers, but produce also additional stock to raise capital later on. So that's the moment that you step on the gas, and that's where you see that the money in the bank does quite the same. So first 500 pieces. Again, the next order of magnitude. Don't go immediately all in because there might be issues. And okay, at this point, if anything goes wrong at this point, typically it's the end of the story. So 500 pieces and then 2,000 pieces. So we managed to not produce 1,500, but 1,000 additional. And basically, at the time that they were arriving from the factory, they were already sold. So because we had some back orders and things like this. So that is basically the most critical point, I think, in any Kickstarter campaign, is the point where you get to production, because it just costs a lot of money, a lot of investments up front, and okay, if you don't take this into account from the beginning, there might be some issues later on. So looking a bit back at 2 years ago, it's been quite some time already, but especially for the first period, as I mentioned, there was a couple of people first working for free at the time, just believing in the product and that we would make it in the end. So of course, motivation is, I think, with any company, absolute priority, and you need to find the energy to continue, because it's not working 40 hours a week. It's a multitude of it, and unpaid, but just because you know that you just believe in the product, and you are also, of course, backed literally by these 1,500 people that give you enough energy and courage to go ahead. You need to do basically everything yourself. If there's some part in the whole project that you need to find external companies for, that you need to pay them real costs, that would really have cost additional drops, and then you wouldn't have made it to the end. And then, looking back, what is really essential is also PR and sales, because even if you're convinced that you have a good product and all of your customers say that it's a nice product, that will not make the product sell itself. You need people really dedicated to sales, distributors, which are really essential to get the product selling, to get it known around the world, and to get sales up. So it means dedicated sales, and that typically means a nice wage. And I think in that case it will become really difficult to get through the valley of death, as I call it. So I think, looking back, it would perhaps have made sense to raise a bit more external capital after Kickstarter, get some full-time PR, and make sure that the sales are going up from the beginning, and as soon as you have production ready, that you have a decent sales channels ready. That's it about the Kickstarter story itself. Another very simple but quite essential lesson I personally learned, because my background is purely technical, is basically where all the money goes to. Our Smart Scope, we sell it for 230 euros. And just to give you an idea about where the money goes to. Okay, so because for some people they think it's really cheap, some people think it's still quite good. A lot depends on, of course, who is deciding. But just to give you an idea where that money is going to. So we're based in Belgium, so there's a fixed 21% tax that's already immediately cut off. That's something that obviously you never see as a company. Secondly, production. These things, they don't come for free. It's not just software. Apologies to any software people in here, but the thing also needs to be produced. It needs to be calibrated, tested. Everything takes a lot of time. So there's some costs included in there. A third one, resellers. So if you are selling through your own web shop, you get this. If you're selling through other people's web shops, that's something, of course, that you need to take into account. So from the 230 euros, there is only the blue part remaining, which is still quite okay, you think. But basically, that is also not final money. With this money, you need to have run the company. There is still more. There is accountants to be paid, the wages to be paid. So a lot of work. R&D for next products, new prototypes, new test equipment, PR as well. So there's actually a lot of money going there into that as well. And finally, there is money left for the wages. But of course, as soon as you pay the people up, there's still another 50% going to the government. So it's just, that's why I got asked, basically tell a bit your story about the Kickstarter. That's what I typically tell there. But it's also something I think is really important that you know this upfront, that you know actually where to put the selling point, the selling price of your product. Don't put it too high, of course, but also don't put it too low, because what is remaining in the end is sometimes not really expected. Okay, that's actually basically the short story I have about the Kickstarter startup way.